Welcome back to the Celtics Nation Rise account. I'm Griffin Aldridge, and we have some breaking news following some more breaking news. So it all happened at once. So the first breaking news is George Niang, sorry, has been traded to the Utah Jazz in exchange for R.J. Lewis, and the Boston Celtics have traded two future second round picks, and this alleviates them from some salary. So they are far underneath the second apron. So just stay tuned because we have some more breaking news. So check that out after. But I was looking at this trade and I'm like, all right, this all happened so soon, and they're getting a two-way player in exchange from the Utah Jazz. RJ Lewis Jr. was undrafted. However, the Utah Jazz picked him up and signed him to a two-way contract. So this alleviates the Boston Celtics of a lot of salary, and this gives them a lot of wiggle room. And it made you wonder because you've seen that Georges Niang was the starting power forward for the Boston Celtics. So there's kind of a question mark at that, but not going to be anymore because there is some news. But this move, you saw the trade with Porzingis. They had to get off of Porzingis' salary, and obviously a lot of people were not happy about the minivan coming to Boston. However, his time is short as he is shipped off immediately, kind of immediately after not even training camp. He shipped off to back home to the Utah Jazz as he spent some time there. Now, once again, will join back up in Utah. So Niang is now on the move, and we get a young guy in RJ Lewis, who I was questioning this a lot at first because I'm like, all right, if we weren't rebuilding, then why are we bringing in such a young guy? This guy shows some talent, obviously, in college, having some good stats. And I don't know too much about RJ Lewis. I will do research and talk about him a lot more on tomorrow's podcast. But this is a big move for the Boston Celtics, and this alleviates a lot of salary now. Getting off of Niang's salary, he didn't have a lot, but this gets you well under the second apron, and this could potentially let you keep Anthony Simons, who we've had a lot of discussions about maybe offloading his salary and getting even cheaper with that. Again, this is going to be an off season where it's kind of dreadful in a sense because you look at this, this isn't going to be an off season where they're making big splashes. No, this is going to be an off season where they're not rebuilding, retooling for when Jason Tatum comes back, and getting a young guy like RJ Lewis. This is a guy who can, if he has some time for the Boston Celtics, can develop and become a winning player because there's some future for him. I mean, he's not a bad baller, and we will discuss that and break that down in tomorrow's podcast. So you won't want to miss that. As for George Niang, though, he knew that he was not liked in Boston. I mean, there were beef with him and Jaylen Brown, and he just talked on Udonis Haslam's podcast, the OGs, about he was like, "Look, I get it. Boston fans don't like me. I took their unicorn essentially and gave me a minivan." So you look at that, and obviously Niang knew he wasn't very liked here, but this is a guy who you didn't want to face. Now you're bringing him in, and he was going to be a guy where, in Boston, he could kind of become an enemy, and like you'd like to see him. He reminded me a lot like Grant Williams, kind of one of those players that you hated facing off against, but you loved having on your team. So that's what we're missing from George Niang. And although his time was small, I opened up to George Niang, and it's sad to see him go because I thought this was a guy where when Jason Tatum could come back, this is a guy that I would not mind having come off the bench. But his time was cut short. And I mean, you knew that George Niang and Anthony Simons, their time in Boston was limited. Anthony Simons, now this could potentially be an option for Simons to stay with Boston a lot longer. But ultimately, I don't hate this move at first because you're getting under that second apron. The Boston Celtics are well under the second apron now. Obviously, just moving off of JD Davison, they got just under there, but now they're a lot under there as We're gonna break that down a lot more tomorrow on the podcast when we have the boys and do more research, and we'll give it all to you. But you look at this trade from another perspective. This kind of opens up a roster spot because it's going to be interesting what they do. Because we just talked about it, Max Shulga has signed a two-way contract with the Boston Celtics. However, there's still one open. So you kind of look at this and you're like, all right, does Amari Williams get that roster spot? And does RJ Lewis get the two-way contract? Or do you move off of Amari? I don't think the Celtics will, because I think Amari Williams will be a lot more productive of a player. But you look at this in the long run too, you could see, with training camp, maybe RJ Lewis is a guy that the Boston Celtics don't keep on to for too long. Maybe they find a new home for him or don't keep him past training camp. Because you look at this, I think the ultimate goal was to alleviate salary. You offloaded Porzingis, you got Georges Niang, you got rid of salary. The Celtics built that back up kind of, with Anthony Simons. They brought back a little salary. They were over the second apron, got just under it with J.D. Davison. Now this is a move where you're getting rid of Georges Niang, you're getting rid of more salary. So it's just salary dumping. They're trying to get under the second apron. They're trying to make a team that can compete when Jason Tatum comes back. And I was excited to see Georges Niang be that missing piece. However, his time wasn't spent so long in Boston. And as for RJ Lewis, you look at this, and this is a move where his ceiling, who knows? He went undrafted again. The Utah Jazz liked him. They picked him up, and he's a two-way player for the Utah Jazz. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with RJ Lewis and what's up next for Boston. So again, you guys, there's breaking news, so go check that out. All gonna be up on the Celtics Nation Rise page. And again, we will discuss this a lot more tomorrow once I learn more about RJ Lewis, because I don't know too well about him. And with Georges Niang, again, it was short. And it was sad because it looked like him and Jaylen Brown squashed the beef, but they squashed the beef a while ago. So no worries in that. But you look at this, it was very quick. His time in Boston, it reminds me of a Danilo Gallinari move. When they brought him in, he got injured, had a 2-year contract, then they offloaded him off somewhere else. And it's very similar, because I look at Gallinari, and obviously he was a Celtics fan, and he was so excited to become a Boston Celtic and play for the Celtics. Now, Georges Niang, the fans didn't like him. However, he's from Mass, so you have to think he is a Celtics fan. So it's kind of the same story in a different thing of it. Georges Niang, you kind of knew that you were going to offload him. With Gallinari, you were really unsure. But again, we will let you guys know more about this tomorrow during the podcast. So make sure to stay tuned and watch that. But with that being said, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications to be notified every time we upload. Again, you guys, we will see you guys with the next one. Peace, guys.